We are going to build our way out of it.
We will axe the federal sales tax on new homes.
The just built more lie. Why housing keeps getting worse. Politicians never built houses. They never did. They approve, they announce, they take credit, and they spin. Homes are built by tradespeople, builders, developers, lenders, material suppliers, insurers, municipalities, and the people that actually do the work. And today I'm going to do what politicians never do. Walk through the system step by step, and why just build more is not an explanation. It's a deflection. And I'm not just talking about one party. This is the game on both sides. Left, right, conservative, liberal, same pattern. Simplify, scapegoat, distract, move on. What you feel is real. If you feel you've done everything right, worked, paid, saved, and housing still keeps, like say, it's slipping away, you're not crazy. The pressure is structural. That's why politicians keep selling you a single villain or a single solution.
We will build at a pace not seen since the Second World War.
Because if you map the real machine, you start asking the questions that they don't want you to ask. Why are they telling me the whole truth? And who benefits from them not telling it? Choke points beat talking points. Housing is not one problem. It's a chain. And in any chain, the links that matter most are the choke points. The places where a small number of players have leverage because there are not many alternatives. When you have choke points, prices just don't reflect cost. Prices reflect power. So let's map the housing chain and the leverage points. The parts politicians talk around on purpose. The housing chain from land to rent, land and zoning, permits and approvals, financing and interest rates, material and labor capacity, construction and timelines, ownership and management of rentals, demand pressure from population growth. If they skip any link, you're being lied to. Just build more ignores multiple links, which is why it works so well as a slogan, because a slogan is not a plan. Choke point number 2, land and approvals. Housing supply is not just how many builders exist. It's whether land legally can become housing and how long it takes. If approvals take years, it's a bottleneck. If zoning restricts density, you have another bottleneck. If every project becomes a political war at the municipal level, you have a bottleneck. Politicians love to pretend they can fix this with just a press conference. They can't. And even if approvals improve, that doesn't guarantee affordability. It just means that the chain can move faster. Prices are still shaped by the next choke points. So ask the question again. If it's so obvious, why don't they explain it clearly? Money and interest rates. Housing runs on credit. When rates rise, project financing changes, bio mortgages change, and landlords' costs change. That hits supply and demand at the same time. But here's what politicians never say clearly. Even if the rates drop tomorrow, you don't get instant affordability because the underlying scarcity, ownership concentration, and demand pressure don't magically disappear. Rates are a lever. They are not the whole machine. And politicians talk like they are the whole machine because it lets them avoid the parts that upset powerful interest. Next choke point, the affordability squeeze nobody admits. Here's another part of the machine that gets ignored on purpose. Wages not keeping up with inflation. Inflation means the cost of living going up year after year. If wages don't rise at least at the same pace, your purchasing power shrinks year after year. That alone can turn manageable rent into unaffordable rent and possible home ownership into impossible home ownership. A reasonable baseline expectation in a functional system is simple. If inflation averages around 3% per year, wages should generally rise 3% per year too. Otherwise, people get poor in real terms even while working full-time. And when wages lag for years, or even decades in some sectors, housing doesn't even need to explode to become unaffordable. People just slowly lose the ability to keep up. So the housing crisis isn't only about what housing costs do. It's also about what wages fail to do. That's the squeeze. Which politician or which political party even talks about that? None. Ownership concentration in rentals. A housing choke point forms when a small number of large landlords and capital pools control a meaningful share of rentals and keep buying more. That concentration creates leverage over rent because When fewer owners control more units, renters have fewer real alternatives. Large portfolios can normalize higher market rent across many buildings. Big capital can outbid smaller buyers and keep accumulating supply. Ownership and management choices shape what gets renovated, what gets priced up, and what gets held back. You don't need a conspiracy for this matter. This is what leverage looks like in a concentrated market. Examples of large players operating in Canada include Brookfield, Blackstone, Capright, Boardwalk Right, Killam Apartment Right. I'm not saying every rent increase is evil. I'm saying the structure creates a choke point, a leverage point. And pretending it doesn't exist is not ignorance. It's lying by omission. So ask it again. Why omit it? So who are they protecting from public anger and public reform? Part 5. The demand reality politicians try to talk around. Now we have to talk about demand. It is not anti-immigrant to point out a simple fact. When you add people faster than you add housing and services, costs go up and availability goes down. People immigrating to Canada are not the enemy wanting to have a better life. I get it, and we should all do. But Canadians are not required to absorb unlimited demand pressure until they become broke, displaced, and homeless. That's not acceptable. That in itself, to become homeless or displaced, is not a moral obligation. That's a political choice being imposed on the public. And this has been going on for many, many years. And it's not just a liberal thing or a conservative thing. It's a political thing. So yes, immigration and temporary foreign workers have to be reduced drastically until housing, healthcare, and wages catch up. Because again, that is being used as leverage on Canadian workers. Stagnating wages or repressing wages, where again, has an effect on the cost of living and a cost of being able to afford a house or rent. Just ask yourself, is that acceptable? Is that a moral obligation on the part of Canadian citizens to take on that burden? If you're not affected by this, good for you. But we have a moral obligation to each other as Canadians that if it happens to some, it should not be acceptable for everyone. Do we have an agreement amongst each other or not? Not as a punishment to newcomers, as a duty to citizens already here who are being crushed by a mad problem politicians refuse to admit. And notice the pattern? And both sides use the problem for tribalism. One side pretends it barely matters. The other side uses it to inflame people while still avoiding the full chain. Because the moment you start telling the full truth, you have to answer. Who demanded the targets? Is it just one side or is it both sides? Who's behind the scene putting pressure on politicians to have a certain number coming in every year? And it seems more to benefit the rich business owners, wealthy individuals, wealthy business owners, than it is for the poor and the middle class. So who benefits from that pressure? Who wanted cheap labor, rising asset values, and permanent scarcity? Part 6, the GDP shield and the growth con. Here's another lie politicians use. They point at GDP like it proves success. GDP can rise while your life gets worse. GDP can rise while rents and housing prices rise. GDP can rise while wages stagnate. GDP can rise while services collapse. If you flood labor supply while housing and infrastructures lag, you can get growth on paper and decline in living reality. So when politicians hide behind GDP, ask yourself, why are they talking about living standards and what cost it to be able to fix it? Who benefits from the gap between paper growth and real life? Part 7, why we will just build more is a political trick. That slogan is useful because it does 3 things. It sounds positive. It avoids conflict with powerful people and corporations. And it buys time. Because if they admit the full chain, they would have to do things that would upset donors, insiders, and influential networks. They would have to attack approval bottlenecks aggressively, not symbolically, restrict speculative pressure, and financialize ownership where it distorts the market. They would have to stop pretending immigration targets are harmless when the housing and services cannot absorb them. Stop using GDP as a shield while living standards fall. So they don't do that. So they just give you one sentence. Just build more. It's how they look when they're trying to answer you while avoiding the real issues. Part 8, what an honest plan looks like. An honest plan is not a slogan. It's a sequence. It sounds like that's how politicians should look. Pay attention. Here are the approval bottlenecks and the real timelines. Here's how financing and rates interact with construction starts. Here's how ownership concentration affects rent. Here's population inflow versus housing completions and service capacity. Here's the catch-up plan. And yes, it includes reducing inflows until supply and wages catches up. Was that hard? So why can't they do it? Ask yourself again, why aren't they saying that? That we all know, or deep down we all know. That's how adults talk about problems. If you're not hearing that, you're not hearing leadership. You're hearing marketing. You're hearing managing democracy, managing what people believe and how they react. And that's manipulation. Is that what democracy is supposed to be? Because that's not what I understood it was supposed to be. Part 9. The real problem is accountability. Now the deeper issue. Even if you agree with everything I just said, it raises the question, why are politicians allowed to tell partial truths as if they are the whole truth? And again, this is not just one side, it's both. They all benefit from a system where deception is legal and influence is private. So if you want real change, you need structural accountability laws, not vibes, not trust, not another election slogan, not another political party, not another politician. You need structural accountability laws. 2 reforms that hit the core. Political perjury must exist. It must. Democracy, liberal democracy, cannot evolve without it. If you can't have a healthy country, a healthy society, if it's not based on honesty, it's impossible. You know that in your life, in your daily life, whether it's in relationships, in partnerships, in business, employer-employee, sports team, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's not based on honesty, it's toxic, plain and simple. We all know this. So if politics is the only place we allow it, that our lives are based on, don't ask for another election. Don't ask for another politician or a party, because you are incentivizing lying, deception as the game. That's its foundation of democracy. We just got conditioned to accept it. So we need to talk about it and change it. If a public official repeats lies, manipulates, or misrepresent material facts to the public, there needs to be consequences. There needs to. Private lobbying should be illegal. If decisions are shaped in private by money and access, then democracy is a theater, performance. Is that what they told you democracy was? Performance? Until deception and private influence are punished, you will keep getting the same outcome, just with different faces. So no, the answer is not just build more. The answer is to stop politicians to hide the chain. Stop letting them hide the choke points. Stop letting them hide the demand of math. Stop letting them hide who benefits. If you want more videos where I map the system like this, instead of feeding the tribal fight, subscribe and share with someone who keeps getting pulled into the one villain story. Because housing isn't getting worse by accident. It keeps getting worse because leverage exists and the system protects it.